Hey everybody, welcome to Talking Niagara this morning. It's Thursday, the 12th of June 2025. Hey, it's going to be Friday the 13th this week, Port Dover week, right?
Oh yeah, it should be. It's nice weather. There should be quite a few. I
Yeah.
was at Friday 13th once. It was in April, so
Well,
there was quite a few people there, but not what it normally is.
yeah, I was going to say one couldn't go stark naked on Friday the 13th of January, whereas one could go stark naked on Friday the 13th of June, couldn't they?
Yeah,
I only say that because of a reputation of certain bikers going down there stark naked.
yeah. The cops are pretty good with them. They walk in tandem. They get catcalled by some of the guys that are drunker than most. The Hell's Angels have usually got a pavilion or a place where they go, and they're usually very well. When I was there, they were very well behaved.
Oh yeah.
And
It's their kind of their parade,
yeah,
isn't it? The
yeah.
biker parade. In fact, it's pretty famous all over North America, isn't it? Not just Port Dover's talked about in many parts of the US, even, right?
Yeah, Port Dover was wasted in the War of 1812. Americans attacked it, and burned it down.
Mm, well, yeah, but it was only a small not that great a place anyway, wasn't it?
At that particular time, it was probably an important port.
Mm, yeah, okay.
Nowadays, no, it's diminished in significance because of Welland Canal and things of that
Yeah,
kind.
yeah.
Um,
Well,
remember, economies used to be much more local in the day.
yeah. Well, it's still a port of some significance,
Yeah, it
mainly
was first
mainly for
discovered.
the power stuff.
Actually, it dates way back to the 1640s. I think it is where French voyageurs and explorers camped there for the winter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, okay. Welcome everybody to Talking Niagara. It's Thursday, June 12th, and we already had a comment before we even started. Good morning, Mike. All right.
Morning, Mike.
As
Mike was,
always, he's always on there early, and it's only basically it's only on YouTube that you can comment before the show starts, because it in fact pops up that the show is in some form of pre-state, ready to get going. All right, not
yeah,
yet live.
yeah. When you're running it on YouTube, you can comment
Yeah,
anytime on it.
yeah. The only thing about YouTube, though, is that the comments that you put in uh, while the show is live are not retained by YouTube, as far as I can tell.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah, no, it's annoying. It's annoying because, of course, our listeners make superb comments. Okay. This first story here really doesn't surprise me. Has never surprised me, and why I'm not surprised at all that the police are doing what they're doing. It has been well known that trucks avoid these inspection stations.
Oh, before we go on, I would just like to sort of do a little bit of homage to Brian Wilson.
Oh,
Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys
yeah,
passed
yeah,
away yesterday
yeah,
at the age of 82. He was one of the uh, modern music's most influential persons.
yeah,
Pet Sounds in 2023, Rolling Stone put Pet Sounds, the album Pet Sounds, as the second most influential album, rock and roll album. All kinds of homages from Bob Dylan to Fleetwood Mac to any number of other great artists have tipped their hat and expressed sorrow for the passing of Brian Wilson.
yeah,
So I just like to put that there.
yeah.
And
Absolutely.
and the other thing I like to put out, I just saw this just a few minutes ago when I was running running news videos. Rand Paul, the famous senator in the libertarian type senator in the U.S., has been disinvited to the White House. The reason why I mentioned this because it's just extraordinary. He's been disinvited, probably the only senator or congressman that's ever been disinvited from the White House picnic, summertime picnic that happens annually.
Yeah.
In his many years, Bush, Obama, Trump before that, Biden, he's never been disinvited or anyone else being disinvited from a summertime picnic. Apparently, Trump is pretty angry at Rand Paul's criticisms of the Great Bill and how it will put people in debt, the country in debt. So he snubbed him. He's also attacked him, had people attack him on X. So there's legions of people who are attacking him on X right now,
which is
telling the world that he's in love with of immigration, letting immigration, and all kinds of other felonious stuff. So you have to wonder why. Like, is this going to be what's going to go on from this point on?
Rand Paul is as a libertarian, Rand Paul is entirely, of course, a different character within the Republican Party, and quite remarkably different to to Trump.
Well, he is a mega guy. He likes Trump. He likes most of what Trump says, but he won't go
but he's a thinker.
Yeah, he's a thinker, and he's put out there that this is going to put us in debt. And as did Thomas Massey from the Congress, say the same thing, who is also a Republican. These are independent thinkers, people that are not. But both of them have come under a lot of criticism in X and other social media, and it's the accusation is that these are paid abusers of these guys, that the White House has paid a bunch of people to slur them.
Yeah.
I think the reason why I'm putting it out there, sort of diverting the normal course of the show, is because I think it's something that everyone should keep an eye on. Is this sort of pettiness going to continue? Yeah. And it's just interesting. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's get back on track. So Lincoln safety blitzers targeting trucks avoiding the inspection station. And immediately Randy West says, wouldn't you avoid something that can stop you from making money while you sit being inspected? Many, if not most truckers are paid only while they're moving. Absolutely. I understand exactly where Randy's point, but also the other thing about it is that it resulted in 17 trucks being pulled off the road after safety concerns were found.
It is a common thing for truckers to try to avoid these things.
Yeah.
In fact, when we did a tear out at Atlas, I was on a millwright team that did a tear out of Atlas. We took out everything in the stainless steel line. We put it in trucks, and these trucks were all overloaded, every one of them.
Yeah.
And the people that were hired were people who knew their way around all the weight scales, this time through the states, so they could meander around in the states and avoid the weight scales and get away with
but Ontario has
trucks.
Yeah, Ontario has a reputation of having the toughest trucking laws.
Maybe so, but I was talking to a trucker not long ago, and he was talking about a local trucking firm that had a policy of avoiding tolls and avoiding weight scales, and they had special routes that he didn't particularly like working for that outfit, because they had these long meandering routes that went around the scales and other things that made his life a little bit more miserable than it would be just to get on the highway and go into an inspection station.
Yep.
The inspections are there because a lot of trucks are getting overweighted. If you look at a brand new road sometimes and you see huge dents in it, that's because an overloaded truck has come by and it was pushed it down, and that's one of the things they do at these inspection stations is weigh the trucks.
Yeah.
Because overloaded trucks can do undue damage to the road.
Yeah.
There are one person that was grabbed in this particular hit they had was a suspended driver. So here was a suspended driver trying to get around an inspection.
So he's bypassing the Vineland inspection station and essentially getting off beforehand and coming back on the QEW afterwards.
Now, another problem with that is because a lot of big, heavy trucks now start going rumbling through rural and smaller towns in and around, and they don't like it. They don't like having these big trucks, rolling down their main street or down their down the roads that they live on. This isn't where the big truck should be. The big truck should be on the highway, but they're trying to avoid that station. I think probably. Anytime that I was I drove back and forth, not a transport truck, but a flatbed, and I would have to be weighed. I would go up and get to Toronto and get, I would get a bunch of stone. In this particular case, there were gravestones, and I'd go up and I'd have to be weighed on the way up, and I'd have to be weighed on the way back, and they'd have to inspect the truck. I got pulled over one time. One of the tail lights had gone off, and that took a little while. They finally let me go, but they're there for a reason, you know. And
but the whole point is what's happening is, of course, trucks are getting off at the Victoria Avenue exit and getting back on at Beamsville and just heading down either the North Service Road or the South Service Road.
Yeah, it jams up things, and sometimes they even take more circuitous routes. Because they know that the MTO is patrolling the more, the service roads and things like that. They might take a more circuitous route. They might go farther away from the main roads to avoid the MTO patrols.
Well, obviously by going out to somewhere like Green Lane or John Street or even King.
Yeah. So people are getting fed up with the trucks going through their places where they live, and I think that was what was the first stimulus to this, according to the article. It seems to be there was a lot of complaints. Yeah, it seems to me that they took a long time to get around it. If they busted 17, well, they pulled over for what 40 trucks, 40 different cars, but 17 trucks they pulled over, and they charged them. There was a number of charges. So I don't know. It's just although it does slow down things, but if everybody does what they're supposed to do, pull over, get weighed, get inspected, keep going, that's probably a lot faster than going around them. And the reason why you're going around them is because there's something wrong with your truck. There's something wrong with your driver. You're overloaded or you're or something.
Yeah. So basically, you're right. 40 passenger and commercial vehicles were directed to the inspection station where they were looked at comprehensively, and 17 vehicles were removed from the road after significant safety concerns were identified. And they seized 2 sets of license plates and issued 37 different tickets for various infractions. Yeah.
Yeah, so there you have it. It's basically these trucks, and Randy's right. Yeah, a lot of people will go around them just because they're inconvenienced, but most of the people that go around them is because they're trying to hide something or avoid tolls or some other thing.
Yeah. And he says, do you realize how many moving, wearing, tearing parts are existing on a truck? And even a weathered mechanic can miss out on daily inspections where the drivers are not expected to be mechanics. and any more than the MTO inspectors are required to be licensed mechanics. Yeah, I get it, Randy. Absolutely, I get it. Right? How do you weigh a dump truck being loaded on roadside construction where the operator is hoping to maximize carrying tonnage rather than drive off half empty to be safe?
You wouldn't write. Look, the tonnage in the truck, if he's going on regular roads, and the tonnage on a regular dump truck should not exceed what's in there. Now, if you had a bunch of iron ore pellets or something, maybe the weight would recede. But normally the things that a dump truck would carry would not exceed the weight requirements.
Yeah, but I get why.
And if he does, and if he does go off the main highway, he's going to go on roads that are unprepared for heavy trucks, and that will damage those
I
roads.
accept what you're saying, Dave, but I also understand where Randy is coming from. That if you drive a dump truck and you're picking up during roadside construction, you have no clue as to how much weight you're carrying.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Yeah, if you've got a dump truck, and you've got it full, you've had that thing weighed. Yeah. You've had that thing weighed at least once. You'll have a very good idea how much.
You're picking it up at a construction site and you're taking to the dump site. And he just said wet mud will easily exceed rated weight.
Well, how much wet mud are you actually getting in it? So we're splitting hairs here. Anytime I see a dump truck, I don't see a whole lot of wet mud in it. I see a lot of stone and broken asphalt or that kind of thing. Yeah, you could get wet mud. You could get a lot of wet stuff in there to make the truck overweight, possibly, but that's not usually what they carry. And most dump trucks know the capacity of their truck, because most of the dump trucks are owned by the dump truck, the guy who drives it.
Yeah, MTO is entirely portable and can conduct their inspections at any location. If deferral is a real problem, I don't think so. All right.
Well, obviously they've had a problem because the people in and around that area were complaining about heavy truck diversions around the highway. So the people who were living there are annoyed by it. And there's a reason why they go around the scales. It's just not to save time. Quite often it is to avoid being inspected because there's something wrong with your truck.
Yeah. Well, the other thing Randy is saying is he's a heavy guy. He weighs 400 pounds. That could put him over the scales easily.
Well, I don't know. I don't know about that, Randy. I don't.
Yeah.
If you see those scales, you must see those scales. You know, I mean, and they're, I don't know. 400 pounds is not. If the truck is 400 pounds over, you're not going to get much of a fine. You're going to get a notice. You know, you're a little over. They're looking for people that are way over the limits.
Oh, I know. But again, some fair points.
I ran into this myself. Like I said, I took a flatbed up to Toronto, many different occasions, but 3 times I was charged with being overweight. Right when I had to go on the scale, so I was charged, and they just let me go, but there was a minor fine for it.
Yeah.
Right. So the company I was working with paid that fine. But it was worth it for them to go overweight. Now, this is not going to hurt the roads too much because it was a small flatbed, you know. But that was the whole point. If it had been a bigger truck, like a transport or something, it was way overweight, they would have pulled that transport trailer off until somebody could unload some of the stuff that was in it. And that's the reason why they do it, because it has a detrimental effect on the roads. And like I said before, when I did a tear out, part of a crew that did a tear out of Atlas Steel, we had special guys that we hired, or somebody hired, the company hired, that were specialists in getting around all the scales in the United States. We had to get this stuff to New York, and every one of those trailers was overloaded. We're allowed 30,000, I think, in each trailer, and we're over 40,000 in each one. And these guys were these guys had brand new trucks and brand new trailers, and they found a way around all those scales to reduce the amount of transport cost, right? And they did, and they got there, and that stuff got all sent to Korea.
All right. Okay. So Randy is saying the fines start at 450. What's the sound going on in your back?
Oh, it's the damn
people at the
lawn people.
Got you. Yeah. Okay. All right. So fines start at $450, and it's the driver that pays.
Yeah, well, if he's working for a company, the company then picks it up. Yeah. But the driver has to worry about his license.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Now, when I was driving, I got three times I got hit with having overloaded truck, and after the first time, I begged the guys not to overload me, but they did anyway, right? Yeah. The only effect it had on me is when I wanted to change my insurance company just for my own car. That came up on my record.
Yeah.
You have 3 violations of driving a truck overweight. And well, there was no charge. I never got any fine, but it did show up on my driving record.
And your insurance went up.
Well, they wouldn't change insurance. My insurance didn't go up, but I couldn't change insurance companies.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want me, because they didn't understand what that violation was. And I said, well, that's for a truck, for somebody I work with. And those 3 violations have to do with the truck and the company, nothing to do with my car.
Yeah. Okay. So heavy trucks are required to deliver product into some of these neighborhoods as well. Remember that. Heavy
trucks are required to well, sure. But I say we're splitting hairs here. The real idea, the real reason for the inspections are to keep trucks safe and to make sure they're not overloaded. Overloaded trucks damage the road, and that's a push on the taxpayer, because the taxpayer will now have to fix that road much earlier than previous. That's why they do it, so they don't have to pave the road as much.
Randy is saying that his truck carries 36 metric tons. In a quarry, the product is loaded to less than a few hundred kilos. And consistently overloaded when loaded at roadside. So if he's loaded in the quarry, he's correct, but on roadside he's not, right?
All right. How many fines have you had, Randy? How many fines have you had? How many times? How many?
Seldom relied upon to keep road logs with license when within license limits.
Well, how many times have you been hit? How many times have you been fined?
No, don't answer that one, Randy.
No, I mean, yeah. Well, seriously, you're saying these things, but Randy, but it doesn't seem that you have you been inconvenienced by this yourself?
I would say he has, but anyway.
But anyway, the whole point of it. And I don't know what Randy's experience is.
Here he's done 20 years with a clean CVOR and license.
Well, there you go. What are you worried about?
But
obviously, you're not getting.
Yeah.
So obviously, it's not affecting you.
All right.
So I really don't understand Randy's objection so much. But then again, I haven't been driving a truck, so he knows better than I guess.
He's a truck driver, so he knows exactly what the issues are. Okay, moving on. NASA's Voyager spacecraft have both found hot zones at the edge of our solar system.
Here's a little bit of science for us all.
Yeah. That's astonishing. I bet nobody expected that. I expected that the further we got out, the colder it got, and suddenly they've hit this zone where it's 30 to 50,000 Kelvin.
Which is around over 50,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
So you think to yourself, okay, where are we at? Where we are at is that point where the heliopause and the heliosphere meet each other. So the sun has influence in this huge sphere called the heliosphere. and it extends to about 4 times the orbit of Pluto. So think of the orbit of Pluto and 3 more times after that, and you have this big ball around the sun, right? 3 to 4 times the distance from the sun to Pluto.
Yeah, and this is
at
basically
this particular point, that is the limit of the sun's ability to affect space in and around it.
Yeah.
Now, at that point, interstellar space, now the radiations and stuff from interstellar space interfere at that particular point. What happens at that particular point, the heat there is this huge 30 to 50,000 degrees Kelvin. So how do you think that Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 ever got through that wall of fire? Well, the answer is there are very, very few particles out there, very tiny. They would never have enough particles that would be able to impart any significant amount of heat to the Voyager 1 or Voyager 2. But the fact of the matter is, any particle that would have been out there, small particles, would be around 30 to 50,000 Kelvin.
Yeah, very hot. Yeah, exceedingly hot. In fact, we couldn't even, it's exceedingly hot out there. But Voyager 1 became the first spacecraft to go across the heliopause, and followed by this was 2012, and Voyager 2 did that in 2018.
Yes, so 2012, 2018, and what Voyager 1 determined, the data from Voyager 1 was used to compare to the data of Voyager 2 that came 6 years later. And the reason why that was significant is because the scientists had long believed that this heliosphere, this huge circle around the sun, and the heliosphere being the very limit of the sun's effect on interstellar space, actually expands and contracts. Depending on what's happening in the sun, that heliosphere is not really a stagnant place in space. It actually expands or contracts a little bit here and there. So when Voyager 2 actually went through the heliosphere and went into the heliopause, into interstellar space at that particular point, they could confirm that because the sort of circumference or the radius of this big sphere had changed.
Yeah.
And that's what scientists suspected was happening, and that confirmed.
Well, the other thing that that's the question that I've had when reading this article is, hey, is there an area out there that kind of this what's it called? The heliopause? No, the heliosphere.
The heliosphere is what's around the world, Earth, right past the heliosphere is the heliopause.
Yeah, but does this heliosphere protect our solar system to some extent?
Not really. Well, you're going. Well,
for example, something coming in might actually be burnt up coming in.
No. Because this heat they're talking about at this border between the heliosphere and the heliopause, there's not enough particles in there, in that area, to ever impart a whole lot of heat. So you might get a particle, and it's excited because of the interstellar radiation and because of the sun's magnetic force and the solar wind and the interstellar wind all hitting at this particular border. If there are particles in there, they might resonate at about 30 to 50,000 degrees, but there are so few particles.
But I'm just wondering whether particles that were bombarding our solar system. We're protected from particles that bombard the solar system.
Well, I don't know what's coming from interstellar space.
No, I don't know either. I don't know that scientists know too much about what's out in interstellar space, and we'll only find this out about 6 to 8 years after Voyager the Voyager craft gives us any measurements.
Well, interstellar wind hits stellar wind, or helio wind, our sun's wind. So our solar wind hits interstellar wind at this particular point.
Yeah.
What is in the interstellar wind that would be injurious to us? We don't know. But of course, lots of things do make it through there. Neutrinos, radiation of all different kinds.
Well, anything
large. As far as the Earth is concerned, we are mostly protected by our atmosphere and our magnetic field from the effects of solar wind, which is much more intense than any interstellar wind would have ever been.
Yeah. Well, interstellar stuff to get this far into the inner solar system would be tough anyway, because it would have to get through. But again, it would have to come through that zone and cross quite a long distance to get to the inner planet.
Well, there's the Oort cloud there, and I think that's the limit of the gravitational effect of the sun too. So you have to factor that in. So the Oort cloud is out there, and that would probably be at the very limit of the sun's gravitational pull.
Yes and no. I think the sun has a gravitational pull, even
Well, it does, but it has an ever declining one.
Yeah.
And it's inversely proportional to the distance, so it's very, very weak at this particular point. So whatever the Earth or the sun has grabbed in its formation throughout its creation, those little particles can still hold on and at that particular point still be drawn in close to the sun sooner or later. But anything past that couldn't, because the sun's gravitational pull is nowhere near enough.
But essentially, what I'm hearing,
the most smallest of particles, it may exert a force on them, but not much.
Yeah, but what I'm hearing from all of this is that any vehicle on any object with a purpose can get through.
Well, if you have velocity, for instance, if you have some space junk or something that exploded, let's say a sun exploded and a bunch of stars, and it went hurling through space and happened to come towards our sun and get through the Oort cloud, then it might get into the sun's gravitational pull, and then it could start to pull it in slowly and slowly and slowly. Kind of like a comet. A comet is way, way out there, and then it comes in. Almost some comets will be thousands of years before they're so far of a loop, but they are unusual, very unusual orbital path, a very really elliptical orbital path that comes close to the sun just once or twice, every once in a blue moon. Like Halley's Comet, for instance, is every 70 years or thereabouts. But the other ones were 200, 400, 1,000 years. I think one of the last ones we saw comes every 1,200 years or something. And it's so small, you really had to be an amateur.
You think about those,
to see it.
Yeah, you think about those comets, Dave. If they've got an orbit of 1,000 years, that the time we've seen them, we've measured out what their orbit is. We were the first humans to actually see that comet, most likely, and record it.
Possibly. But anyway, I just thought the article was very, very interesting. That this interstellar, that the Voyagers have long after they've done their primary mission, are still giving us information about the space. And now they are truly in interstellar space, and they are beyond the reach of the sun at this particular time. The sun will never be able to bring them back into its influence. So they are continuing through interstellar space and continuing to send back data. we'll see how long that will happen because the batteries in this thing have to be charged up before they can send any more data. So the farther away you get from a light source, the farther away it takes, the longer it takes for the batteries to charge. And once they're out there in interstellar space, I mean, you're reaching temperatures close to 0 Kelvin.
Yeah, absolutely, you are. Yeah, absolute zero. You're reaching temperatures close to absolute zero, and that in and of itself is interesting to note how electronics works at that temperature.
So far, they've done so well.
Yeah, and in fact, actually, they tried to shut down Voyager 1, but it woke itself back up when it found a significant point.
Yeah, so they. I don't know. It's just pretty interesting. Anyway, so that's the way the world looks to us. And we can see that science is an ever-evolving thing, that we once thought we were in the center of the universe. And then we realized that the sun was in the center of the universe. And then we realized the sun was only part of the universe, part of a galaxy. So the galaxy was now the universe. But then we found out that the galaxy was not the universe. It was only part of the universe of many galaxies. So our ideas continue to change,
and actually
to evolve.
Voyager, the Voyager probes have given us so much information. Right. She's talking about we're supposed to get quite a storm from the sun.
Yeah, that happens from time to time. Back in the 1840s or 1850s, there was a massive solar storm on Earth, and it wiped out everything that was electric at that particular time. And it will do that to us too.
Well, they've been predicting
most defense things and all that are shielded from these huge magnetic storms or solar winds that could come from the sun. Like I said, it hasn't happened very often, but it happened way back in the 1840s or early 1850s.
Well,
all the early telegraph lines and anything that was electric at that time, it wouldn't be very many things, were completely wiped out, and that could happen today. So our computers, our televisions, all of our telephones and satellites up in the circulating the Earth could get wiped out by an intense solar storm. But
that said, Dave, likelihood is that most servers, things like Google server, is actually in a protected area anyway.
Well, it still will cause an incredible mess if it happened again. I don't know if we have a whole lot of protections from it. So Betty is right.
My computer might get erased. But once we got them reconnected to the world, we'd find that we'd get them reconnected.
It's not just the connections; it's the kind of damage that kind of a solar wind will do. And I'm not even sure if it's a solar wind or a magnetic storm.
No, it's a magnetic storm they're talking about. It would they often come with solar winds, but up to date, over the last, they've been predicting these for about 15 years now, and every one that we've had has not produced.
They've never been as intense as that one back in the 1840s or 1850s.
No, exactly.
Yeah. They haven't been that intense. That was an extraordinary one, and if it had happened, in 1930, say, it would have wiped everything out. I don't know what kind of effect it would have nowadays. It definitely would do a great deal of damage.
Well, there is even on your average computer, there's a certain amount of EMP shielding.
Well, that's all I know. They're afraid of that, and if one of that intensity happened today, there would be an incredible amount of damage. Probably to satellites, to electronic things, to telephones, to your personal computer.
Yeah, your disk drive or solid state drive these days has a tendency, has a shield on it.
Well, I don't know. Is it enough to protect against something of that?
I'm not saying it would necessarily protect against that magnitude, but
so what Betty's talking about here is she's talking about a solar storm of some kind.
Yeah.
Where did you get that information, Betty? Is it
right? Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
Where did you hear it? Like this happens from time to time.
We've had lots of predictions of solar storms. Let's be
Yeah,
honest.
and we've had them too, but they've been smaller and more minor, and they've done some minor damage to satellites and things like that. But I don't know what the one Betty is talking about now.
We've gotten our systems back up and running, and we have, to a large extent, protected much of our systems. Off Rebecca Weatherwoman in EQ and volcanoes.
Off Rebecca Weatherwoman in EQ and volcanoes.
Yeah. All right.
So she's talking about volcanoes as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that can make a mess of things as well. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Moving on.
Is that Ecuador? EQ, Ecuador?
Maybe. Yeah. Moving on. Niagara Falls mayor is concerned about the paint that fades on our roads. He's raised concerns about the new federal regulations affecting road paint durability, and he's concerned that much of our roads already contain things like pollutants like antifreeze gas, oil, and salt, and that the environmental impact of paint is of concern, and that fading road lines can lead to increased accidents and safety risks. I get his point, and I understand where he's coming from.
Well, this is a catch-22, isn't it?
Yeah,
this is always what this is. I find this happening continually all along. Yeah. You have this environmental idea that the kind of paint that we're using might not be the greatest for the environment. So you make it much less intrusive in the environment.
Yeah.
You try to make it a kind of paint that's much more environmentally friendly. But what happens, it doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what we find now.
The other
this catch-22 situation where you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Because if you use the new paint, it wears out and fades very fast. And in the very beginning, it's not nearly as luminous anyway. So what do you need for the road? You need strong paint that stays on the road as long as it can and is as luminous as possible for safety purposes.
And the other challenge that we have, of course, is that we scrape our roads every winter because of snowstorms.
Well, yeah.
Chips away those white lines.
Well, that's where we live. We live in Canada. And that's the problem. But what the mayor has said here, and what many other people have said too, is what's more important. If you do the paint that's more environmentally friendly, what is the risk assessment on that? And I'll use the words that I learned from walking around with Gary and Mike, that risk assessment phrase. Now, the paint, is it more risky to be a little bit more environmentally problematic? Or is it more of a risk to put environmentally better paint on the road to have it wear off and endanger the drivers because they can't determine where the road is?
But the last thing you want is road markings that disappear in the rain. You know, well, I know I'm being cynical, right? But we don't want road markings that disappear in the rain.
No, we need good paint on the road.
Yeah.
Now, when these in the Ontario roads, like this is a federal law that says that the kind of you can't use the same chemicals as you used before because they're environmentally bad. But what happens is the MTO, like Ontario, will determine what kind of paint would be good, what kind is luminous enough. And these go through studies and then they are contracted out. But now what's happened is the federal government has stepped in and said, yeah, these really good paints, we don't like them. And you can make paints, but they can't have these things in them, which we have found makes a very poor marking. And it requires the city and it requires the province to go around and do a lot more painting to keep these things luminous.
Yeah. And okay, so we get increased accidents if we have road markings that fail, but there's higher maintenance costs if we because of needing to repaint the roads more frequently to maintain visibility, which of course strains municipal budgets and diverts funds from other critical infrastructure projects. The environment. Obviously the environmental trade-off is that we're looking to reduce pollutants on the road, and that fading markings could cause accidents leading to vehicle damage, emergency responses, fuel spills, etc. And then you've got, of course, a whole heap of potential legal issues, because every one of those accidents, every one of those issues we just talked about could lead to a lawsuit. Right.
Well, this is a well-meaning jurisdiction, and we find this happening over and over again. These are well-meaning ideas that fail.
Yeah.
The road to hell is paved with good intentions, you might think. I remember working. Right. I remember working in factories and in food producing factories that used ordinary grease in their machines and everything. So they suddenly decided, well, that's no good. Somebody stuck their nose in and says, well, you got to have environmentally good grease in those machines. Well, what happens is they buy all this environmentally good grease, and that environmentally good grease does not work.
Yeah,
it works. You always have to keep greasing it, and it never works, and the machines jam, and so on.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Somebody's come along and said, well, this is the kind of grease we should use because it's environmentally great. And nobody's gone along and tested it enough to say that it's good enough. And this too is good intentions. Somebody's come along and said, well, that paint is not exactly the most environmentally friendly type of paint, so let's change it to one that is. However, now this is endangering drivers.
But we have a strip of road on the QEW in the Niagara region between Beamsville and Vineland that actually test various paints. So they've got lines painted on there, and the whole point about those is that you go over them thousands and thousands of times as the traffic goes over them, and that's supposed to tell the longevity of the paint.
What you need is resilience and luminosity.
Yeah. Exactly. Right.
But like I said, this is a well-intentioned mistake, because what happens now is we have paints that are supposedly more environmentally better, but they don't last. They are not nearly as luminous enough. So what does that do? It puts drivers at risk, and in order for them to be maintained, we have to paint them over and over and over again, which probably negates the environmental positive that they first have. So if you take something that's environmentally a little bit environmentally better, but you have to paint it 7 or 8 more times, how much more environmentally better is it than the original paint we have to do once?
One of these new road markings that was put up. It was a road that I used to travel across. I still travel across. Last year, they put up new road paintings on all of the areas. And what happened is, on a particular junction, where everybody turns left, it was brand new paint. Where everybody turns left, there's basically a set of tracks, a set of no paint. And where everybody turns right, there's a set of no paint. Right? So there's a nice white strip across the road, which is all, which is brand new paint. Yet there's no paint at all in the areas where most cars travel. Most cars go the left-hand turn or the right-hand turn. It's the T junction.
Well, that obviously because there's more stress. When you're turning a corner, there's a lot more drag.
Yeah.
If you're going straight compared to where you go in a corner, because you've got not only velocity going forward, you have velocity going sideways, which pushes against the paints.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that I think basically what the
And what
mayor
Becky
has
is
said
saying,
here and what the other mayors have said, the ones that contacted Mayor Diodati on this, is pretty much the same thing.
yeah,
What kind of advantages are we getting from what the federal government has proposed here? Now, the federal government has proposed these things, but has not proposed a satisfactory solution.
yeah,
What the federal government has proposed is causing us to have to paint the roads more and more with paint that's much less luminous. Is that an advantage or a disadvantage?
yeah,
I think
absolutely.
basically we're thinking we better go back to the old paint until we can find an environmentally better paint that can stick and shine as much as the ones we are using now.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on, a Fort Erie councillor is calling for the CEO of the Niagara health care system to resign because of the decision to reduce urgent care hours in Fort Erie and Port Coburn.
Yeah, it sounds pretty good, but did that CEO have any choice?
Yeah. During
it's really nice to blame the CEO and say, look, you're not telling me what I want to hear, so we're going to fire you.
Yeah. Well,
will the next CEO be able to do anything different? Has anyone ever really explained that?
No, that's a fair question, Dave. And so what happened during Fort Erie's town council meeting Monday night, Councillor Tom Lewis said he will bring forward motions to June 23rd to withhold municipals' previously committed funds to Niagara Health for its South Niagara Falls Hospital under construction and redirect them to other healthcare initiatives presumably local to them in Fort Erie.
Yeah, well, basically, I'm not so sure that this is a valuable thing for this particular counselor to do, who's demanding that the CEO be resigned and pushed out. Tell me why. You didn't like hearing what the CEO said, but did the CEO have much? Did the CEO have any choice in the matter? The CEO had to make a decision based on the number of doctors that were available, and so it reduced the amount of time that you could go to a doctor there. But what else was the CEO supposed to do?
Yeah.
Now, if the counselor could say, this was a bad decision and I can prove it, I can prove that we could get better coverage and more often than he said that the CEO says we could do. And this is the reason why I say, because there are doctors here available, there's doctors there available. Show me the proof. Now the CEO has come up with a decision that nobody likes, but did he or she have any choice in it? And this is not what the counselor is talking about. You're just mad. It sounds like to me.
Yeah, I get it. And here's the particular question that we have in mind, that we have the question about, Dave, is that city councillors are often working on gut feel and personal, let's say, personal feelings, personal understanding about a situation. Then they're likely as not health professionals. I know nothing about Tom Lewis, not trying to malign him at all, but likely as not, he's not a health professional. He's just somebody who's concerned about the use of healthcare system in Fort Erie. And
is he just blabbing what the people want to hear, or is he doing what he's supposed to do and look into this and suggest alternatives?
But chances are he's not a healthcare professional.
So what's he beaking off about for?
Yeah.
If he doesn't know what he's talking about, what is he beaking off for?
And that's the point. And the CEO of Niagara Health is also, well, they may have started life as a healthcare professional, but they're also, now in the healthcare, they're in the business of running a healthcare business, if you know what I mean, right? Because they have certain rules about how they run the healthcare network within Niagara, and those things, they have to make decisions based upon what people,
I lost you there for a little while.
Yeah, what I was saying is the CEO doesn't make a decision on their own. They make a decision based upon advice that is given to them by people working within the healthcare system. Within Niagara Health in this instance, right?
Yeah. So
they also take advice from outside.
Lewis here is the guy that's complaining, right? Yeah. He's complaining vehemently, and I know he's going to get a lot of people who are on his side with this because they don't like what they hear either. So when he says, well, we got to fire the CEO, that's the solution, that's irresponsible. He has to tell us why he wants to fire the CEO. What mistakes did the CEO make?
Yes. Yeah.
Those are the things that we expect from a counselor. I can understand a counselor getting mad, saying this is unacceptable. We have to find a solution for this.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to go to the CEO and tell him, what can we do to make this different?
Yeah. And what Betty's saying here, we think we have too many other people doing somebody else's work gets to be a responsibility on somebody else. Yeah. And the thing is, an elected councillor has their opinion and they have a right to their opinion. But again, in order to deal with this and actually criticize the region's healthcare CEO means that they need to be beyond just personal gut feeling.
Well, that was my point from the very beginning. Is I accept that Lewis is angry. He is demanding the resignation of the CEO, but he hasn't given reasons for that. All he's done is saying, I don't like the decision the CEO makes. Let's get rid of the CEO. That's what it reads. That's irresponsible. What he should be doing is saying, this is not acceptable. How can we change it? How can we change it? Is there a way in which we could change this and make it better?
Yeah.
Then you bring the CEO and say, what are you up against? What do you need to make this better? And the CEO can report back to them. Yeah. We only have X amount of doctors. We only have X amount of nurses. This is the best we can do. If you can get me more doctors and nurses, I'll fix it.
Quite.
So
and mayors of Fort area, and we've heard mayors of Fort area, mayors of Port Coburn actually talking about with deep concern about the reduced hours being unacceptable, and how healthcare is being hit in both those communities. And it's not an issue that arose yesterday. It's not an issue that's going to be solved tomorrow, right? It's an issue that actually has to take much longer term, concern in getting this resolved. And to be quite honest, where we stand right now, 10 years ago, they were talking about closure of both the urgent care in Fort Erie and Port Coburn as soon as the Niagara Hospital was open. And now they are seeing more sense that you've got to keep the urgent care open.
Well,
albeit with reduced
my mom's right now in Port Coburn urgent care. She's down there. What it's being used for in her particular wing is for therapy and assessment, things that aren't really an emergency anymore. And the people that are in there are almost all of them are older people that have had some sort of illness that they're overcoming or an operation that they've overcome, and they need to have therapy and assessment of where they stand. So it is functioning. It is filling a very useful purpose. It's just not, in this particular case, an emergency point. And I don't see anything in that hospital when I was there that could take on an emergency. I never saw one ambulance go there. I never saw any kind of emergency situation happening there at all. But the hospital is functioning well for other healthcare needs.
Yeah.
So I would expect that these facilities may stay open for those reasons, for the reasons not surgery, not emergencies, not epidemics, whatever, but they will be used for therapies and reassessments and all kinds of other things, occupational therapies and things that are part of the healthcare system. However, to get back to this fella beaking off about the CEO should be fired, I think that's irresponsible. You have to give me a reason why. And so I wish why, maybe he does. Maybe he does have good reasons for the CEO to be fired, but let's hear them.
Yeah. And
not just as somebody didn't care.
You see, I've always been a supporter that a town requires the ability to provide its own care for its own residents within its own town limits, and not have to travel to a hospital 30 minutes down the road. I've always believed that. Thank you, Randy, for giving me that particular part, because you and I share a view on that particular one.
Is it possible, though, when we already found out that we don't have enough doctors, we don't have enough nurses? Is that even possible? Yes, it's the ideal thing. Yes, we do. We want Port Colborne to have emergency care. We want Fort Erie. We want every town and village that, within a certain radius to have emergency care. But is it feasible when we don't have enough doctors? We don't have enough nurses. We don't have enough healthcare professionals. What's feasible?
Yeah. Randy is saying that getting doctors and nurses is not the problem. Budgeted funds from provincial and federal government is the problem. And I understand and agree again with Randy on this one. Getting
how will budgeted funds change the fact that you don't have enough doctors and nurses?
Budgeted funds allows us to get doctors and nurses.
Yeah, where from?
Yeah, they're more likely to come here if we have a greater budget.
So you're saying we got a big budget and we take the doctors from other areas. The fact is that there's a dearth of doctors. We don't have enough doctors in Canada. They don't have enough in the States. So we don't have enough healthcare professionals. How is more money going to solve that? What you need is more doctors and nurses. So you need more schools, you need more medical professionals.
Randy makes the point we already have immigrant doctors here already that are not permitted to use to work in the healthcare system.
Yeah, but that's not as big as you think. A lot of times the immigrant doctors that are not allowed to work in our facilities because they can't write the test. They have to learn English or French before they can write the test. And even if they do, quite often the standards are not that high. You take an immigrant doctor, like I've had a doctor from Sudan, I've had doctors from different places in Africa, but they were educated in Europe or London. A lot of them got their diplomas from London or from somewhere in Britain.
I would not like to be treated by.
And they are quickly absorbed into the system.
I would not like to be treated by. I would not like to be treated by a doctor from Saudi Arabia. A nurse showed me a Saudi Arabia. It took me to a bookstore in Saudi Arabia. We were in the bookstore and got chatting. And she showed me this is the standard manual that's taught in the USA for doctors. And she opened the pages, and half the pages, if there were pictures. For example, showing pictures of breasts, they're all blacked out with Sharpies. And
is that for the doctor or for somebody who's just looking up medical information?
This is for the doctor. These are doctor instruction manuals that are sold. This is in a university bookstore.
Well, then you want if you have a Saudi doctor, then you want one educated outside of Saudi Arabia. Obviously.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly the problem, right? But anything that shows human, cutouts of human skin, for example, we're all blacked out, and of course those blackouts mean you can't read what's on the paper for the next 6 pages.
So you're saying that these pretty much what you're saying there is you can't really trust a foreign doctor, and you've just given the example of you can't trust a doctor that comes from Saudi Arabia. So if a doctor comes from Saudi Arabia and comes to Canada, even if he speaks English, you can't trust his license.
I'm saying Saudi Arabia is a particular problem because of this, because of their censorship.
Well, how many other countries have low standard of medical education? So you take a talented person from Saudi Arabia and they go to medical college in Italy or in the UK.
Well, if they've gone to medical college,
well, they have a high degree of medical education. They have ones that are universally accepted. But if you go to the university of the Medical University of Chad, you might not get a full and complete license that would be comparable to one today here.
But there needs to be a scaling up process that allows these people to become doctors in Canada.
Everybody's been trying to do that, and I agree with you completely. But I will tell you that almost all the doctors that I've seen lately have been born outside Canada, and they got their degrees from outside of Canada. I've had Indian doctors, I've had African doctors, I've had Asian doctors. Yeah. I haven't had a native-born doctor for a very long time, except for my GP. But every kind of specialist I go see comes from a different part of Asia or Africa. And those are the doctors we are. So obviously we're getting a lot of doctors from offshore that qualify, aren't we? Because just about every specialist that I've seen in the last 20 years is being born offshore.
Yeah, well,
and they come with their degrees, not from Canada, usually from Europe, though.
Well, when I was unfortunate to have to go to a hospital to deal with my eye situation, we're gonna have to finish now, more or less anyway. When I had to go to the Toronto hospital for my eye situation, the doctor that I saw was actually from Central America, from Costa Rica.
Yeah. So I've seen surgeons from Venezuela. I've seen specialists from Sudan. I've seen specialists from other places in Africa. Right now South Africa. I've seen specialists from Pakistan. I've seen specialists from India. I've seen specialists from Vietnam. I've seen specialists from all over the place, and almost all the specialists and even the radiologists I go to are all offshore. They all were born elsewhere and educated elsewhere. Yeah. So something is happening. We are getting these people and they are being introduced into the system. But what's the difference between them and these other people who are not?
All right.
Is the fact that they have a command of the English language. That's number one.
Yeah.
Or French. And the other thing is, when they do get that command, can they pass the test? And we found this out from just a nurse last week, or a couple of weeks ago. We're reporting that this nurse had come from the Philippines and she'd done all this work and everything, and she was found to be lacking in abilities. Yeah. When even though she took the courses and the upgrades and everything, she still did not qualify.
And there's always going to be people, irrespective of where they come from in the world, that do not qualify because they don't have the knowledge. All right, we're going to have to call it quits at that point.
Okay, and don't forget, guys, I want to put that in there too, that Canada, the UK, France, New Zealand, and Australia, or UK, Norway, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand have sanctioned Smotrich and Ben Gvir as extremists, and they're getting a lot of heat from the United States, which become ultra weak on Israel. But at least it's a step in the right direction. Those are extremists. They do call for extremist solutions, and they are being sanctioned. But anyway, well, it is a small step in the right direction, but hopefully we can get that thing solved.
Yeah.
I can't see a solution anytime soon, but if we keep putting pressure on Israel, it might happen.
Yeah. All right. Bye, everybody.